Welcome back. It's time for our panel now here on Sky News. And I'm joined in the studio from the Centre for Independent Studies by Simon Cowan. Thanks for your company.
Thank you.
And from the Institute of Public Affairs, I'm joined by James Patterson, live from Melbourne. Thanks for your company.
Great to be with you, Peter.
All right, well, James, to you first. I've got to go here first because we'll obviously get on to all things from politics today, especially the Productivity Commission report. But I badgered you about the Senate a few weeks back and you very stealthily avoided the answer by saying that there was no vacancy. Well, guess what? There's a vacancy in your home state, no less. Michael Ronaldson stepping aside after years of service. Are you going to be a candidate?
Well, Peter, your sources must be impeccable. You were first with the news on that one. Yes, Peter, I am happy to confirm that I will be a candidate for the Senate vacancy caused by Michael Ronaldson. It's something that I spent the weekend thinking about, discussing with my wife Lydia and also fellow members of the Victorian Liberal Party. And I've been really encouraged by the support that I've encountered. So there are some really huge shoes to fill with Michael Ronaldson. He's made a terrific contribution over a number of decades. And if I was chosen to have that honour, it would be something that I would really willingly take up.
Well, we can agree to disagree on the size of the shoes you've got to fill. But let me ask you this, though. Well, firstly, do you know if there are any other candidates that have either announced or look like they're announcing?
I'll leave the commentary on that to others. I think my Liberal Party colleagues would dimly view any active commentary, particularly on other potential candidates.
That is true, and it's technically not allowed, I believe, to have a public discussion about internal matters. So we won't do that to you during the course of this program. Although this is the last program for the year with our regular panel. Do you know, the pre-selection will probably have been decided, won't it, by the time we come back after the week of the 18th of January?
It may be. That would be a pretty quick turnaround. The party has a number of processes to follow, and it may take a little bit longer than that. But as I said before, that's a matter for the party to decide. I'm just a candidate, and I'll willingly participate in any process that it designs. Well,
don't go hanging us out to dry here on Sky News. You are a regular. We expect that the good pre-selectors of the Liberal Party would like a reliable person, I think, as their next senator. Now, let me ask you this though. This is a legitimate question for anyone that wants to go into politics, and then I'll get Simon Cowan's response. If you do go into politics, you're going to have to toe the party line where the party is weak and insipid on things like industrial relations reform. Now, we heard today Michaelia Cash, I didn't know she could run that fast. She's walking away at 1,000 paces a minute from the idea of embracing penalty rate reform, because that's something for the Independent Fair Work Commission. Come on, you're more ideological than that. You're with me, aren't you? Work choices didn't go far enough.
Well, politics is a team sport, Peter, and there is a difference between working at the IPA and being a Liberal senator and elected part of a team.
Yeah,
and,
you stop saying what you think.
I'll get to that. Yeah, you're only ever there due to the support of the whole Liberal Party, and we should never get too caught up with our own egos in that. But while ever I'm still at the IPA, Peter, and as also as a senator where it's appropriate, if that were to happen, I'll tell you my honest view too, which is that industrial relations reform is absolutely critical. Australia cannot afford to leave our industrial relations system as it was under Rudd and Gillard, which was really a 19th century industrial relations system. This is the 21st century. We are pursuing an innovative economy, and under Malcolm Turnbull, we're supposed to be agile and responsive and supportive of entrepreneurs. An outdated industrial relations system that pays people more on a Sunday than it does on a Saturday, and more on a Saturday than it does on a weekday, is looking seriously outdated and in dire need of reform.
Well, one senator that will be happy to see you join the ranks if you are so lucky is Senator Zed Zezelja. We spoke to him earlier here on Sky News, and he echoed much of what you've just said there, James Patterson. Simon Cowan, you are not even shackled by the possibility of a political career, unless I've just accidentally consigned that to the can early. What's your view on this? I mean, Michaelia Cash does not sound like she's up for the fight, although it sounds like she's got her fingers crossed behind her back, hoping that the Fair Work Commission does the heavy lifting.
Look, the amazing thing about the Productivity Commission report is that it is really quite a mild prescription. It opens off with the suggestion that the current system is more or less okay in its current form, that it needs some tweaks, not replacing, and that there is a role for collective action enshrined in the law, and that shouldn't be challenged. So the idea that this is some sort of union busting, wholesale revision of the industrial relations system is a nonsense. It says there are a couple of small tweaks that should happen, and it's disappointing that the government gives up on those before they've even even started, particularly things like penalty rates. But also, if you look at the impact that some of these things have on youth unemployment and vulnerable people in community, that's where the minimum wage and penalty rates and youth rates really hurt, and they're the things that need to be addressed straight away.
Yeah, because you can free up the capacity for more employment even if the rates aren't as high. But let me ask you this though, is there a role for government in this penalty rates debate, given that it is the Independent Fair Work Commission that sets penalty rates? Now, Michaelia Cash couldn't have said that fast enough or more often in her media conference. Labor's been very critical of that, Simon Cowan, but at the end of the day, is there a sort of a suggestion that the government can make it more likely that the Fair Work Commission moves in that space because of what, its public rhetoric or commissioning reports like the Productivity Commission report?
Well, I think it certainly should. I mean, the comparison Michaelia Cash kept making was the RBA.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
But if the RBA unilaterally decided they wanted to change how monetary policy operated without any reference to the government, without any reference to the public, then I think that would be quite a significant concern. And this is what we're talking about here, a relatively significant redesign of the way that penalty rates operate. It's appropriate that government has a role in that debate and has a voice in that debate, and pushing that off to someone else in the hope that they'll take the hard decision for them, I think is a bit of a cop-out.
James Patterson, it's a silly comparison, isn't it? This idea that the independence of setting of monetary policy by the Reserve Bank is akin to the Fair Work Commission and penalty rates. Penalty rates, as you would well know from the IPA, is much more of a public policy open debate than the monetary policy and the setting of interest rates.
Well, on this one, Peter, I think we should go back to first principles and ask why in the first place did politicians give the Fair Work Commission the power to set wages? Why on earth should a quasi-judicial government body, which is arm's length from the political process, decide what a fair wage is? I mean, perhaps there's an argument that government should set some basic standards in the system and a basic wage, perhaps. But beyond that, isn't it the role of the market to, through supply and demand and scarcity, award people
James,
a fair wage for their value?
Let me just jump in. As I understand it, it was a sort of a 93-94 issue from the Keating government. But are you of the view that that is something that governments should decide? It's a public policy debate where and how penalty rates should be set. So governments should be looking at that rather than sort of independent bodies. And therefore, you're agreeing with me, aren't you, that Michaelia Cash's comparison to interest rates is one that, even if it is the case, and she's right in fact, it shouldn't be the case?
Well, in a free enterprise economy, Peter, I want the market to set prices. We would never accept the government setting the price for milk or the price for bread or any other major staple. So why should we accept that the government should set the price for labour? If there is any role for government in setting a price, then maybe it is a minimum floor level price like the minimum wage, and that involves trade-offs. It involves trade-offs between the number of people employed and the wages of people in the employment market. And you can make, it's a contest of values in a sense. How much do you value getting people into work, and how much do you get into value remunerating people well who are in work? And I think that is an appropriate thing for politicians or the political system to decide. But above and beyond that, what people should be paid on a particular day of the week, a particular time of the day, in particular industries, well, that should all just be set by supply and demand, and people will be paid more when they add greater value.
See, James is probably going to feel dirty me saying this, Simon Cowan, but I agree with him. I'm with him. We're on a unity ticket when it comes to IR, by the sounds of it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of improvements that could be made to the system on that wholesale systemic, basis. The Australian system of industrial relations came out of a series of cases in the sort of early 1900s that were designed to entrench this settlement between protection for wages, protection for companies, protection of certain industries, and all of that should have been taken down long before now. We've still got remnants of protection, particularly in the agricultural sector and in the manufacturing sector. We've got protections for unions and for workers in certain industries that don't need to be there. One of the things that the Productivity Commission found and emphasised a number of times in their report was that the protection of minimum wages primarily benefits those people who currently have a job at the minimum wage and will keep it even though it's inefficient. It disadvantages people like consumers and people who are unemployed now facing additional barriers.
Okay, but Simon, the counter to that position is that if you remove the minimum wage or you reduce it, then you have have a sort of so-called working poor. There's a lot of that in the United States because theirs is much lower. Do we really philosophically want that in this country with our sort of social liberalism that tends to permeate here?
Well, look, I think you're better off dealing with poverty through the welfare system than trying to shoot.
You're also trying to cut that. You're trying to reduce the welfare system too.
I am indeed, because people should look after themselves where they can. I think you don't want to try and shoehorn welfare measures into the employment system in the same way the government tried to do with, say, paid parental leave, because it simply doesn't work very well. It makes your employment system less effective and it doesn't save any money. You're better off dealing with poverty through welfare, and employment should be there designed to try and give people a boost and to make the market work more efficiently.
All right, James Patterson, in 30 seconds, this is your philosophical outlook with PVO. Let's go. Gay marriage, for or against?
In favour of gay marriage, provided that there are sufficient protections for religious liberty and freedom of conscience. And I have to say, of the available bills so far, I have concerns that it won't be sufficient.
Here I was hoping for a yes or no. I don't know who I was kidding. You're built for politics. All right, stem cell research. Do you think that it needs to be looked at more closely, or let the market rip?
Look, I'm in favour of stem cell research, but with all things, Peter, I'd be very dubious about direct government investment and involvement in it. I think it's much better left to scientists and those who want to invest in their research.
Do you share the concerns about Islam of Andrew Hastie and Tony Abbott and some others on the Conservative wing, or do you agree with Malcolm Turnbull on that particular issue?
I think we have a real issue with Islamism, which I would distinguish from Islam. Islamism is the political ideology that's often associated with Islam and has been taken up by, I would say, a disturbingly high number of Muslims, including in the Western world. And I think we have to have an honest public discussion about that.
And just finally, would you like to see GST reform, whether it's broadening the base or up in the rate, or, as a bold, courageous Humphrey-esque position, maybe do both?
Well, there's absolutely no case for increased taxes in Australia, Peter. We pay easily high enough taxes already. We should be looking at lowering the taxation burden, and I would like to see us talking about the need to lower personal income tax rates, company tax rates, work out how much that's going to cost, and then work out how we fund it. I don't think we should start the conversation by saying, let's increase the GST and then work out how to spend it.
Simon Cowan did all right on those. What's your view on each of those issues?
Yeah, look, I'm in favour of gay marriage. I'm in favour of stem cell research. I'm opposed to increasing taxes of any kind, particularly the GST. So I think...
But on the GST, what about increasing the GST as a more indirect tax, which economists like? You're supposed to like it, you're an economist, yep. Versus, you know, equally having all the other elements that could make sure that the overall burden doesn't go up.
Look, the challenge with that, as they found in New Zealand, as they've found elsewhere, is that you increase the GST and trade off that against income taxes. Over time, income tax rates go back up, and you've ended up with a higher GST and the same income tax as you had before. That was the exact experience that New Zealand went through in the 90s and 2000s. If we could find a way to replace those taxes permanently and say, for example, reduce company tax by 15%, then you'd have a better case. But the trade-off of GST for personal income tax is too easy to unwind if you get into a bit of a revenue fix.
James Patterson, just on other issues, some of which I alluded to there, though, there's this massive spat that seems to be going on inside the coalition at the moment in relation to, and I'm not even talking about Ian Macfarlane, but in relation to ASIO and this idea of, you know, did the Prime Minister ask the head of ASIO to contact MPs? Is it a difference if all he did was offer a mobile number of Andrew Hastie to the head of ASIO? It does look like there's some tension there, doesn't it?
Well, I can't comment on whether there's tension or not, but I'm very happy to comment on the substance, Peter, which is that we should give, you know, very due weight and consideration to the views of ASIO in their area of expertise, which is protecting Australia from terrorist attacks and preventing terrorism. What's not really the role of ASIO is a much broader question, which is how do we sustain our liberal democracy? How do we support our pluralistic, tolerant, open society? And that, in my view, is really fundamentally domain of members of parliament. And I'm very happy to see members of parliament engaging actively in that debate. And I don't think they should be discouraged from doing so.
Simon Cowan, do you concur?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of free speech. I'm very concerned about private interventions by security heads in the conversations of MPs in public. I think that's a very, very troubling move from ASIO in that respect. I agree with the substance, I think, of what the ASIO head said. I just don't like the visuals of that. I don't like the intervention that's happening.
Almost lecturing members of parliament.
Well, and what basis on what basis is the head of ASIO got a right to say to a Member of Parliament, you shouldn't be speaking in these terms? I can't see any reason for that unless that Member of Parliament was, say, sharing national secrets on ABC radio. That's a case for intervention. Having a position that says I don't particularly like a religion, or I don't like the way that people are expressing their particular religion, is not something that I think warrants head of ASIO's intervention.
And we're right out of time, but very quickly, Simon Cowan, Eric Abetz, he described the new ABC boss, as having to, quote, end the lefty loving. Do you agree with him? Oh, look, I read Ray Martin's report last week that said that balance was fine, but they needed more Greens. I don't know that's going to satisfy the critics. Yeah, but you didn't answer my question. Do they have to end the lefty loving? Well, I think ABC tries to put a pluralistic view in most of their shows, but I think they should have more appearances by me personally. I think that'll solve
that.
Spruiking yourself for the ABC on Sky. James Patterson, your view, is Eric Abetz right that they've got to end the lefty loving as quick as you can?
Eric Abetz is 100% right.
All right. Well, there you go. I got a short answer. All right, James Patterson, appreciate your time. Have a Merry Christmas and all the rest of it, although it sounds like you will be busy. Simon Cowan, same goes to you. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate your time.